All right. Hi, everybody. So I am Arthur Savage. My pronouns are he, him. I am a software engineer at Red Hat, and my project is in post-quantum cryptography for digital signing. I'll be talking a little bit about my work in open source in this area. I hope you'll find it as interesting as I do. So there have already been some really wonderful talks today that discuss the basics of post-quantum cryptography. I will cover them as well, and I'll try and keep it brief because I would like to get into some of the newer, more exciting stuff, what's happening right now in open source, and with a project that is near and dear to my heart, SigStore. So we'll start from the top then, I suppose. Right. So cryptography is pretty important. The entire internet runs on it. All of our most secure systems, financial, government, and it's used in a variety of different ways. Obviously for things like networking, so TLS communications. We use it for digital signatures so that you can verify who wrote what. And also data encryption. These are all different standards for all of these things. And when you look at it as a whole, you think of it as public key infrastructure. And it involves a lot of different algorithms, different working pieces. What we're going to focus on is a classical cryptography, as in RSA and elliptic curve encryption. You might know them as asymmetric cryptography, public-private key cryptography. They're all different ways to describe the same thing. And they rely on similar mathematical tricks. So integer factorization, such that the computer on your desk or your phone can multiply two integers easily, but cannot factor them if they are prime and large. And that is the primary math trick that most of modern encryption relies on. But as we will see, quantum computers kind of throw a wrench into that. So I will not try and explain how they work. I would embarrass myself in attempting to. But the most important part is that they are non-deterministic. And they open up a whole class of non-deterministic algorithms that can leverage parallel computing in a way that even GPUs cannot. They're good at calculating a lot of different possibilities simultaneously. And that has interesting implications for stuff like hyperparameter tuning, really complex simulations, and spoiler alert, breaking encryption as well. It helps that they're hard to build. Quantum mechanics is difficult, if you'll believe it or not. But they're getting larger at an alarmingly fast pace. Specifically, so when I mention quantum algorithms, Shor's algorithm is typically what we talk about when we think about what will break classic encryption. Anything that is related to like Diffie-Hellman, RSA, elliptic curve, they are all vulnerable, which means that the backbone of modern cryptography, as soon as quantum computers are large enough, will essentially no longer work if nothing is done. The footnote here is that not all cryptography is vulnerable. So things like symmetric or block ciphers, so your disk encryption will technically still work. It is managing keys that becomes insecure. So like AES is not considered vulnerable. And one-way hashes, like SHA hashes, should still work. They do become weaker. Like Grover's algorithm specifically speeds up finding hash collisions. So it's not invulnerable, it's just still considered computationally infeasible. And we say that a lot, and computers keep getting more and more surprising. So something to keep in mind for the future. There are there's one attack you will hear about all the time, and it's harvest now, decrypt later. Essentially, you can think of it as scraping the entire internet and then figuring out what you want to decrypt when you have a computer that's large enough. This is already happening and has been happening for many years now. So we consider that an active attack, even though no one has yet admitted to having a quantum computer large enough to break current communications. Something that is not really talked about enough is digital forgery. So at the same time as communications can be decrypted, digital signatures will also become, how do I say that, repudiatable? It violates non-repudiation. Am I saying that word right? You can, essentially digital signatures will no longer be valid. Obviously, there's an asterisk here. So like you can kind of infer which signatures might still like have been valid at the time that they were made. But obviously that's not how we like to do cryptography. So we have to do something a little better than that if we're going to maintain the integrity of the software supply chain. Oh yeah, so in case anyone in this room wanted to feel old, I was 4 years old when Y2K happened. So I don't have any exciting stories, but my dad sure did. My family has always lived in like rural areas. So, you know, typically in the dead of winter, they're kind of like no one's there because it's cold and there's nothing to do. But miraculously on New Year's Eve, the turn of the millennium, everyone was in the middle of the woods. And that's because there was a lot of misinformation about what was going to happen for Y2K. For those in the room who are younger than me and may not be aware. Oh goodness, hang on. Yes, oh my God. It was missing my little Y2K. Okay, oh goodness, what was I saying? Yeah, so, right. So, yes. So Y2K, the like 2-second gist is that dates, there wasn't enough, like that the clocks could not accommodate the dates beyond New Year's Eve on 1999. Yes, I can speak. But there was a huge engineering effort to make sure that the worst of the problems from clocks turning over would not, you know, cause the world to fall apart. And because there was that kind of anticipatory engineering effort, the Y2K is kind of remembered as a nothing burger, which is a very good thing. It's a success story. Okay, good. That showed up this time. Yes, please.
Because of the software, it was had 2 digits instead of 4 digits, and so when you get past, you know, 1990, you get to 1999, and you're only doing 99. It's like, what happens? Does it reset to 1900? And that's where you had to switch it from 2 digits to 4 digits, and that would, you know, solve the software issue.
Thank you for explaining that in a much more eloquent way than I was able to. Yes, I figured. Your input is appreciated.
I was in the data center, like, okay, what's going to happen? Let me take care of it.
Yeah, it is really cool hearing, you know, the stories from people who actually lived through it, you know, because like so much more qualified to talk about this than I am. But we can take the same lessons that we learned from Y2K for Q-Day, the day when a quantum computer becomes large enough to break RSA encryption. We don't know when that will be. Unlike Y2K, we don't have a precise date when dates will not work anymore. So, yes.
I was going to say, so one more thing. When people are talking about the keys, they're looking at what's the rotation time on the keys. So when you get into like Microsoft Azure or, you know, Key Vault, or you're taking a look at AWS's version, it's okay. So one of the things you can do is, you know, refresh the keys, and that way you have more, you know, of new refreshness, newer keys to compete against, you know, the increasing compute power of, the quantum. Yeah.
Are you asking if we can make RSA big enough that it doesn't matter?
I'm
Okay.
saying, what are your possible solutions?
So, the possible solutions are post-quantum cryptographic algorithms, and that will be discussed a little later in the talk. Yes. That's all right. I'm taking the roundabout way to get here. But, you know, my point with these anecdotes is that, you know, putting in the effort now will save us a whole lot of headache later on. Right, and let's talk about dates again. So no one really knows when the cryptographically relevant quantum computer is going to become available. It may already exist. We don't know, which is why preparing soon is very, very important. The timelines that you're seeing here are from the Commercial National Security Algorithm Suite. Recently, let's see, it was last updated December 2024, and the timeline is here. It only matters really for national security software. Like if you make software for the US government, this is what you're following, but it matters to everyone because this is what the NSA thinks will happen. And their timelines, as you can see here, is they're beginning enforcement in 3 months, 4 months? Yeah, so that's soon. With them expecting or requiring, I should say, that all national security software be completely quantum resistant by 2035. Obviously, not everybody in this room makes national security software, but these timelines matter because they can provide insight into what's going on behind the scenes. So let's talk about the algorithms themselves. So selecting them has been a huge adventure, a multi-decade effort, primarily headed by NIST. So there have been 4 rounds now, I think, of academic researchers submitting potential algorithms that might be resistant to decryption by a quantum computer. They've gone through multiple rounds of peer review, experimentation, and the result has been a set of FIPS documents that provide the pseudocode for how to implement these 2 primary algorithms in bold, ML-Chem and ML-DSA. There is a third, SLH-DSA, that I will not talk about because it is currently out of favor, as more or less these PQC moves pretty fast and standards are changing constantly. I believe they are coming up with something else. I think it might be Falcon that they're considering next, but I won't speculate too much. We're focusing on ML-Chem and ML-DSA because those are the 2 algorithms that are kind of forming the backbone of the new post-quantum cryptographic infrastructure. So a lot of this work was done by NIST, but I want to highlight some of the international contributions and specifically talk about the European Commission. So they released a PQC roadmap for all member states, which gives a lot of freedom to individual countries of what algorithms they might implement. And there are dozens of potential algorithms that have been discussed worldwide. And some of these standards differ from what NIST has to say about what they think the future post-quantum algorithm should be. Some of them conflict, some of them are complementary, but the worldwide, cryptographic landscape is a little bit chaotic. So it's important if you are writing software for, the world to know that things are different, like worldwide, and the standards will change. We are not yet sure how. Let's see. What was I going to say? Right. So this is the big 2 algorithms in a nutshell. ML-Chem is what you would use for communications. So it is to like TLS, OpenSSL. This is what they are using to replace RSA and elliptic curve for concealing keys over public channels. So that is specifically what's for addressing harvest now, decrypt later. ML-DSA is for anything digital signing related, and it's been the focus of what I personally have been working on. And these 2 combined kind of fill the gap from RSA and elliptic curve. It's not perfect. Obviously, these algorithms have not been tested at large scale. They are currently being integrated into core cryptographic packages like TLS, OpenSSH, etc. But they haven't been around that long. So it's a work in progress. And PQC is not a one-to-one swap out with classical cryptography, especially they are changing all the time. I'm pretty sure one of the slides I will show you later I made last month and it is already out of date. So like it's moving at lightning speed. And that's why crypto agility is so important. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it goes beyond even what algorithm you're using in that most of them are big. And having your signatures be measured in kilobytes instead of bytes has huge implications for like edge devices, Internet of Things, anywhere you have memory constraints. If you use a lot of keys and signatures, that can, like, if you have blockchain or a transparency log, it matters a lot. So these are things to consider as you are considering your future cryptographic needs. Also, I mentioned on the last slide, there are potential vulnerabilities. They haven't been tested in the same way that like RSA has. So like we could find something tomorrow, 10 years from now. We don't know. We'll just have to find out when we get there. And some of them do not behave the same way as classical cryptography, so they might have additional parameters. They might be stateful. Not all of them are, but it's something to keep in mind depending on which algorithm we all end up using. So what are things like today? You know, I kind of think of this as the wheel of chaos and misery, because ideally we would all come up with one standard and it would work beautifully forever. But life is not that simple. What we see is the multiple rounds of algorithm standardization. You know, NIST produces FIPS documents, and then open source implements them somehow, and then your applications will get those algorithms, and then something will change, and round we go. And it means that you might need an algorithm before it becomes available in a core package. And that's kind of what we're seeing now. For example, like, let's see, so Golang has lagged behind a little bit with ML-DSA, but has done ML-Chem first. So you can see it's kind of staggered. And that's not like a Golang specific thing, but you will see that different algorithms are becoming available at different times. So if you need something sooner, you might find yourself at an impasse, which is what a lot of open source is dealing with right now. This is actually the slide that I was saying was out of date. This was July. There's a new one every month. But you can kind of see that the implementation internet-wide is a little bit patchwork. They're all happening at different timelines. Some of them, as you can see, are blocked or stalled, etc. Like, let's see. And you will notice here that this does not include core language libraries. So, like, yes, this is kind of a look at some of the most widely used programming languages and whether they have packages available that are native that you could decide to use now. And there's not like a ton of options. I would say we have some really nice third-party packages in Go. Java has options, C and C++. But it's not like, for example, Python has no options. And like, how many of us use Python? So, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about crypto agility. It's really necessary to tackle the like growing threat of quantum computers. It's also really hard. Like, and it, we were even talking about this like in the last talk. It's so hard to change legacy systems. And when you like make big changes, it's a huge effort for maintainers. It can lead to vulnerabilities in itself. So like crypto agility is a big ask. So you kind of see this tug of war with like, you know, needing and wanting stability and also needing and wanting the ability to swap out something if an algorithm is found to be unsafe. So there's no easy solution. And I'm going to use a project that I've been working on and working with upstream for quite a while now, SigStore. Show of hands, who knows or uses SigStore? Yeah, that's a lot of hands. It's an extremely prolific and very large project. For those of you who aren't familiar, the goal of SigStore as a whole is to make software signing easy, which is really critical for preserving the integrity of the open source software supply chain. It is also, like I said, very, very big. And when you have a large, sprawling system, it's hard to make changes. That's true of any project. And like this kind of brings me back to the philosophy of stability. So SigStore, as many projects do, tends to be conservative and opinionated about which like cryptographic algorithms to use. And there's a very good reason for that. A lot of really like high sensitivity projects use SigStore, so the decisions they make matters a lot. And Golang has a really well thought out cryptographic library that does not currently have post-quantum cryptography in it. And part of the reason that Golang makes those decisions is because they have, 10 years of support is what they try and commit to. So like adding one algorithm is an enormous commitment. So again, these are all very reasonable decisions, but it does create blockers when you as an open source developer are trying to integrate new cryptography into a system at more aggressive timelines like CNSA 2.0. So I spent a lot of time thinking about how do we uphold the philosophy of stability while still providing the flexibility needed to introduce PQC where we need it most. And that's what kind of got me thinking about the blockers and like how do we keep things, expedite these changes in a way with minimal, like, how do I put this? Having experimental portions of your system as opposed to having it be like the whole system changing at once. So let's see. Right. So I actually wanted to highlight some work done by some upstream colleagues of mine, Trail of Bits. So about 2022, they put out this software proposal to the community to introduce crypto agility into various parts of SigStore to eventually allow for the introduction of post-quantum cryptographic algorithms. That was about 3 years ago, and they've done some really incredible work. And this is all just in advance of having the algorithms available. They recently released their own version of PureGo ML-DSA, which is pretty great. You can check it out. Obviously, like 3 years is a lot of work to do and still not have the algorithm in your library. And that there's like a lesson to be learned there that this takes time. That's why starting early is so important. And I would also like to take the opportunity to plug some of the work that my upstream colleagues have been doing too. So Zach released this blog like on SigStore that illustrates the like community's overall position on post-quantum cryptography. If you feel like looking it over, it's a really good read, and it kind of details what the post-quantum transition looks like for a project like SigStore. Let's see. Yeah, and then this is just a very quick overview of some of the stuff that my team and myself have been working on. So a lot of understanding how to make PQC happen has been just a lot of conversations, like GitHub issues, PRs, trying to figure out how to balance the needs of a massive community. Because like, I think last time I checked, SigStore had like 33 repos. Was it? It's huge. Like, so small changes have huge repercussions for clients. So asking everyone for their input is really important. And conversations take time too. We've made some initial changes to make ML-DSA possible, but what we're exploring now is creating external plugins and libraries so that you can use SIG-Store signing framework with more experimental post-quantum algorithms without compromising the stability of SIG-Store itself. So just general takeaways. I copy-pasted this from NIST's website, and I thought it was really like the almost 2 decades should scare you a little bit, because this has been going on since 2016 is when the NIST competition started. That's 9 years ago. Yeah. So we're halfway into this timeline, and it's really important to not be complacent, to start earlier rather than later. And that's a tall order. We must begin now. And this is a little bit of homework for you to take away, as if you don't already have enough to do. Take stock of your cryptographic libraries. Like, figure out, what do I use? Where do I use it? How much effort would it take to change this when we have to? Educate yourself. Post-quantum cryptography is not necessarily intuitive. There is a learning curve, and it is best done together. And you can try using it too, like TLS 1.3 is now PQC capable. OpenSSL's most recent versions have it too, so you could try using it in your projects in your everyday life. And try to make contributions if you can. Yeah, and we'll figure out when the due date to this homework is together. Right, huge shout out to all of my wonderful colleagues, both upstream and at Red Hat. Thank you all so much for attending today. Any questions?
Thanks. Have your mic back.
Sorry about that.
You mentioned somewhere along the line about the new post-quantum algorithms are like have a different parameter shape than some of the traditional ones, and I don't know, is that causing a problem for crypto agility?
It can, and it does depend on the application. So MLChem and ML-DSA were selected in no small part because they are relatively easy to use in a more one-to-one fashion to classical cryptography. Like the size being the biggest difference, but especially like, so when I was talking about things being stateful, like LMS, LMOTS, those are stateful. So there are additional like management considerations if you're going to try and use them. So like it might matter depending on what algorithm ends up being used. It's something to be aware of. What worries me most is the size, honestly, as opposed to additional parameters. But it depends on the algorithm too. It does.
Like when you say size, how big are they?
So there are multiple security levels for each of these algorithms. ML-DSA is somewhere between 2 kilobytes and 4 kilobytes, depending on the security level. That's big. So like it's non-trivial. And some algorithms are smaller or larger, but it does not seem, at least with what is currently available, like there will be small signatures anymore. That may become a thing of the past. But someone smarter than me will know more about that. Yes?
So you mentioned that different countries have different standards for like what they consider to be like, I guess, like coverage for like quantum safe. Do you know how they like test for like an algorithm to be quantum safe? And does it like differ from country to country? Because you said that like countries have like different standards, or are they like checking for different things?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, so let me back up a couple. There we go. So this is actually a simplified version of the other slides I had. So there is something of a disconnect between the people who are writing the algorithms and then the governments who are like mandating which ones to use. So to repeat the question, sorry, you asked about how the algorithms are being decided.
Yeah, like how they're tested, like what
How
they're
they're
checking
tested.
for when they're looking at these algorithms.
Right. So the testing, there are multiple parts to the testing. The first is that they put out the pure math behind the algorithm, and then academics look at that math and say, hey, does this look like it makes sense? And they're relying on different hardness assumptions than the ones that are currently for RSA. So it's like different complexity. I'm being super simple here because I don't want to get into the math. And then based off what the academics say, there are standardization documents published, so like NIST, typically, and then the software is written because the standards are actually just pseudocode. So then the pseudocode gets written by some software engineer somewhere. And then the testing can be done on that code. So you can see there's multiple steps here, multiple places where things can go wrong or be missed. The math theoretically should hold because it's math and we know how great theory holds up in practice. But whether the code that someone writes is secure or is accurate to the theory, that will depend on the implementation, which is why things like hardening, auditing code are so critical. And when it comes to international, like different regulations between different like nation states, some of it has to do with the nation's political affiliations, and some has to do with like their own infrastructure considerations. More or less, like ML-Chem and ML-DSA are relatively like widely accepted, but some governments are saying, oh, you need to have this security level, or you need to support this additional algorithm. They're making decisions based off what their like, nation requires. That's why we see variability there. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does make software engineers' lives harder. Does that answer your question enough?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
So, my understanding of cryptography is that you have like 3 different kinds of algorithms. You have the digital signatures, you have the asymmetric encryption, and you have symmetric encryption. It looked like the 2 algorithms you listed were just asymmetric and digital signature. Is there one for symmetric encryption?
Symmetric encryption will, if it is large enough, not be impacted by quantum computers because it relies on symmetric encryption, like through AES, doesn't use integer factorization or discrete log problem to get their strength from. So they are not impacted by quantum computers. There's a slight speed up because of Grover's algorithm, but essentially, like it's different math, so it's not vulnerable in the same way. And the same thing goes for one-way hashes like SHA and SHAKE. They are not vulnerable to quantum computers because they're not relying on the vulnerable matrix. Does that make sense enough? Yeah. So your AES is safe as long as it's big enough. Anyone else?
One last question.
And you can also catch me in the hallway. I will hang out if anyone has additional questions. Yes.
So you talked a lot about software and the increasing demands for memory, and do you see people talking about how hardware may be impacted by this as well? Or do you think we'll just keep adding, bigger storage and bigger memories and that'll take care of it?
People will only talk about it if someone brings up the conversation. And, that's why it's important to, recognize, hey, these are big, which means that manufacturers are going to have to take that into consideration, especially for hardware security modules and IoT devices where like space is so critical. It's going to be a really big problem, in my opinion, because a lot like TPMs as they exist now do not have the memory to like manage ML-DSA, you need a new TPM, and that's a problem. TPMs are everywhere. Yes. Actually, someone did another talk talking about HashiCorp Vault. Yeah. And then Intrust, I believe, has post-quantum hardware security module. There are also, like, there's a variety of manufacturers who are working on them now. That's like a whole talk of its own. So we could catch up a little bit more about that later. That's actually what I'm going to be looking into shortly. So yeah, that's interesting, exciting, scary. All right. Thank you so much, everybody.